So there's requirements for being in that ministry place. He goes on, he must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so they will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. And then he says, deacons likewise are to be men worthy of respect. Okay, so a deacon is a word meaning a minister. And really it's a generic term. So in the traditional kind of theological view that Calvin put up, he said, basically you have overseers and then you have deacons down here. Well, grammatically speaking, a deacon is just anybody who is a minister. It could be somebody who's an overseer. It could be somebody who's waiting on tables. It could be somebody who's, prophesying. It could be somebody who's an evangelist. But they're a minister. The word deacon just means a minister, okay? So it is somebody who is now working in the church. So if a person is going to be working in the church, they're to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith. And then it says they must first be tested, okay? So that a person who is going to be appointed will be, tested. Okay, you check them out. Have them in a provisional standpoint, see how they do. Have they passed all of these qualifications? If they have, then they can be given an office in the church, so they can be appointed. And that, going back then to these, they can not just be called to be an apostle, but they can officially be put into the office of the apostle, or the office of the prophet, or the office of the evangelist, because there's the call and then there's the ministry. Okay, you can be called, but you need to be trained and then tested, because people are called early on, perhaps before they were even became a Christian. Well, that doesn't mean you just make them, a leader in the church. They have to be trained and then tested, and then they can be appointed. Okay? They're both given by God, and they're both to be used for His glory, in His service, and to serve other people. Okay? The second point is that faithfulness in the natural comes first. Remember what we just read in Timothy about those who are going to be overseers. What did he say about their family? He said they had to manage their family well, because if they couldn't manage their family, how could they manage God's family? The natural had to be demonstrated first before the spiritual. Okay? So we see the same thing taking place in Luke chapter 16. In Luke chapter 16, it's the parable of the shrewd manager. And it's a parable that sometime we will study in depth. It's quite interesting. But right now, I just want to pull out something that Jesus says at the end of that parable. In Luke chapter 16, towards the end, starting in verse 10, he says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." Okay? So if you are faithful with a little, you will be faithful with much. If you can be trusted with a little, you can be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Okay? So then he says, "So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? So, again, worldly wealth, the natural, true riches, spiritual. If you don't make it on the natural, who's going to trust you with the spiritual? Then he goes on to say, he makes it more clear. If you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? So it's leads in now to the second principle. The first principle is that the natural comes first, and the second one is those who are faithful with a little will be given more. Just like he said here. He said, whoever is trusted, can be trusted with little, can be trusted with much. Then, if we turn to Matthew chapter 25, and again, we won't go into this entire parable, although it is worth studying. But right now, just for time's sake, again, the way this parable goes is there was a landowner, and he was leaving on a journey, and he called his servants, and he gave them talents, which is a sum of money. He gave different ones different amounts of money. To one, he gave 10 talents, 10 times this amount of money, which, let's see, I don't know if they gave an equivalent. Oh, it says a talent was worth more than $1,000. So he gave this guy $10,000 to one of them. To the next guy, he gave 5,000 or 5 talents, about $5,000. And to the next person, he gave 1 talent. Okay? And so what happens is the guy with the 10 goes and puts it to work and invests it. So does the guy with the 5. And then the master returns, and he calls the guys in, and the guy with the 10 says, see, you gave me 10, I've made 10 more. So he doubled his investment. And the master says, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. This is in verse 25 of chapter 25. Come and share your master's happiness. So he was given 10. He earned 10 more. Jesus said, well done, good and faithful servant. And then the guy who had 5 said, you gave me 5. I earned 5 more. So he gave him back 10. And the master said the exact same thing. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So he says to the guy who had 10 and made 10 more, well done. You've been faithful with a few. I will give you much. The guy who got 5, got 5 more. Well done. You've been faithful with a few. I will give you much. Same thing. He gave them different amounts. They had different capabilities, but they were faithful in taking what they had been given and using it, developing it. And so he said, well done, I'm going to give you more. And then the last person said, well, I knew you were a hard master, and so I just buried it, and here's your money back. And the master looked at him and he said, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Why then should, well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. So you should have done just something with it. You did nothing. You buried it. You didn't use it at all. You've been given this. You did nothing with it. Okay? You didn't even give it to a banker, which would take no effort other than your first giving. You kept it. And you buried it. You didn't use it all. And he says, God says, take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more. And whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the principle is faithfulness. Each one of us have been given gifts. If we don't use them for God and for God's people, we bury them, keep them to ourselves, don't grow in them, don't invest them into others, God's not going to be pleased with that. But all he's asking us is to be faithful. You may not have what this person over here has, but you're not being compared to them. This is, what did you get? What gifts do you have? If you are faithful in using those, God will say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. So as we're wanting to grow in our gifts and discover what our gifts are, we have to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to recognize that we have spiritual gifts and we have natural gifts. Those are all given by God. They're to be used for him, not just for ourselves, not just to build our own kingdom, but they're to be used for God's service, to bring glory to him, to help others. That's why he gives us gifts. The second is that we need to be faithful with our natural gifts. Okay? The things that God has given us, that is a testing ground to see how good we're going to do for the spiritual gifts. As if we can't take care of money, who's going to trust us with true riches? So the parallel here is that we become disciplined and using our natural gifts and the things that we have and that we can do in service of God and in service of others, and then God gives more. And as we are faithful in serving him, he will give us more and keep adding.